that contributes to well-being and certainly a lens of our school and what we want to give parents. And this lady here, it's been so rare that seriously, kids like run into her Chumash class. I can't wait for Mrs. Solish.
Some days, yeah.
I'm not saying they leave, I'm saying they just run in.
And they run out too.
Yeah, they run out 3 minutes like that. But it's been a long time that I've watched kids' eyes light up when she shares her wisdom and her patience. And she also has 6 kids. 6 kids, and gets here before, like that's pretty
strategic. Out the door before they wake up, because then I'm stuck.
So I thought it would be such a wonderful opportunity for us to hear before Pesach some words of wisdom and something to help us be more creative in our Seder's.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, Sylvia.
doing that.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I have my wine. Not too early, is it? We're tackling Pesach and parenting, so we might have to crack that bottle. The Seder, the lens that I want to take today together is the Seder and parenting. Like, what does the Seder, what tools, what ideas, what can the Seder teach us and tell us, what messages are there that we can take away as parents? And some years ago, the Museum of Art and Culture in Amsterdam, the Rijksmuseum, it put out when it put out Rembrandt's most famous painting, The Night Watch, it restored it, and the curators found that people would spend about 6 minutes looking at this painting, and they wanted to get people to spend more time at this exhibit. So they did a simple experiment. They asked people to submit questions about the painting and about the history of the painting and about the artist. How much does the painting cost? What was the painting ever forged? Questions that they may not have come up with themselves. And they picked out the 50 most popular ones, and they plastered them up on the walls on these big posters in the hallway leading to the exhibit. And they had people walk through this hallway on their way to the exhibit. And they had to spend a couple of minutes kind of in this room, and they would look around and they would read the questions, and they would have questions. Their own mind would open up with questions that they hadn't necessarily thought of about this painting. What was he thinking? Who are the subjects in the painting? What techniques did he use? All those types of things. And people would read the questions and the answers. The answers were there as well. But once they had done this activity of reading the questions about the painting on the way to view the painting, the museum curators found that people went from spending about 6 minutes to over half an hour. Wow. Just because they had these questions, they now had a better understanding, or they had questions in their mind, they had opened their mind up to by reading these questions. And so this museum, this Rijksmuseum, discovered the secret that the Haggadah and the Manishtana and all the questions that we ask at the Seder, the rabbis discovered this thousands of years ago. And they set up the Seder and the Haggadah in a way that it incites questions. Usually when we have a Shabbat meal or a Rosh Hashanah meal or a holiday meal, we make the Kiddush over the wine, we go wash our hands, we come back, we cut the challah, we make the hamotzi, we cut the challah, and then we eat our meal. What happens at the Seder? We start with the wine as well, but then we wash our hands, like usual, and then we come back to the table and we take this vegetable, we dip it into some sort of liquid, and we eat it. Why the change? Why the vegetable? Why the dipping? Why the salt water? And you'll get different answers. The salt water reminds us of the tears, vegetable reminds us of this. Well, you'll get different answers, but there's one definitive answer in the Code of Jewish law, and that answer is, why do we do all these things? Why do we go in this strange order and do these strange customs?
And you gotta tell people to tell the story.
To tell the story. But how do we tell the story? So that the children will ask, when they see this different customs, different order, they'll say, wait, why? We just made the blessing on the wine, we just made the blessing on the bread. Why are we not eating something now like we usually do? Why are we dipping a vegetable into salt water? They'll ask why. So the whole reason for that setup, the main reason for that setup, is to get the child to say, but why? Why are we doing this in this order? And if they do ask, or when they do ask, what do we answer? We don't answer. We answer, you are right. You got it right. You got it right for asking a question. That's exactly what you were meant to do. This was supposed to open you up to asking questions. And thousands of years ago, the rabbis that set the Seder to be this way knew this same idea that you cannot learn anything new. You cannot teach a child something anybody new unless they have a question. Until they have a question, there's no space, there's no opening in their skull to fit something new unless they ask a question, unless they open themselves up. So, and you may have a child that needs a bit of prompting, and that's why we have the Ma'ashtana. Here are some questions that you may want to ask, that you may be thinking that you don't, here are the words that you can use, but we're really trying to get, that's really plan B. Plan A is getting the children to ask on their own. When we ask a question as a parent or as a teacher, when we ask a question and a child gives an answer, the correct answer, so they could have a great memory, they could know what you want to hear. At best, we're finding out what information they have already in their brain. But a question, when a child asks a question, you are getting a window into their mind, into their soul, and that is priceless. So tip one from the Seder is from the actual Haggadah, which is encourage questions. Encourage your child to ask and to wonder and to say why. And don't be intimidated by those questions. Don't shut down those questions. Don't ever, dismiss them. Listen to them. You don't have to even have all the answers. You can just answer as best as you can, as honestly as you can. If you answer, I don't know, you're also teaching them honesty and humility. So really, this encouraging of asking questions, you don't have to have the answers. It doesn't matter what the answers are sometimes. You can look it up, you can find it out, you can ask somebody else, you can tell them I don't know, you might have to rethink something that you do because your child said to you why. But the questions are the goal. So Pesach is coming. Pesach, the Seder, the whole structure is the ultimate educational experience. The Haggadah is the ultimate parenting book. The way we're going to go through the Seder tonight, we'll realize how much parenting wisdom there is in the Seder and in the Haggadah. Wine is the ultimate parenting elixir. And the Seder, as Sylvia said, the Haggadah comes from the word V'higadata levincha. The whole Seder is to tell the stories, to transmit the story to our children. And we don't sit down and lecture them, we don't even read them a book and show them pictures, we actually experience it. And it is, in education today, this whole Pesach experience, the Seder, and the 8 days of eating matzah and eating and experiencing what Pesach felt like is the ultimate of pedagogy. It's hands-on, it's tactile, it's experiential, it addresses all different types of learners, all different types of students, different learning styles. It really does educate a child in the ultimate way. And we'll look at some of the other Seder plate items and discuss some lessons that we can take from them with parenting. So the first item, actually we'll get to the Seder plate, the first item that we encounter at the Seder is the Kiddush. We start with our wine. Most important. So Kiddush comes from the word kadosh. Kadosh means holy. And this moment when we're pouring that glass of wine and about to say Kiddush, it is the perfect time to look around the table at our children and remind ourselves how kadosh they are, how holy they are, how unique and special and inherently valuable. We're gonna take a moment and stop judging them by their accomplishments. And even though we know this, but sometimes we just get caught up in, what their grades and their report cards and their accolades and which team they're on and which part of the play they're in. And this is just a moment to remind ourselves that our children are more than that.
And they're not necessarily a reflection of us.
Right.
Like we have to take our ego out of it too and say you're holy for the sake that you're holy.
Exactly.
Not
You're holy
that
because you have a
I
piece of,
brought you here.
Right. You're holy because you have part of a piece of God within you. You have a soul, and you're holy for that.
Well, they're made in God's image, not.
Right. We're just there to. Hey, good morning. So when we open the Seder, the first thing to do is to remind ourselves of that. And when, the self-esteem through the Jewish lens has two factors. One is that we want to give our child a sense of competence. So we do want to give our child the skills and the feeling that they have the skills to be successful. That is one. And two is what we're talking about, which is that feeling of, yes, they do need skills and they do need to feel competence and they do need to feel confidence, but no matter what they do or don't do, and no matter if they're successful or not, they still are essentially and infinitely valued. And that's the idea of Kiddush. And it takes both of these. It takes to raise happy, healthy humans. We want our children to feel like they have skills and abilities to accomplish things successfully, but at the same time, even when they aren't successful and even when they fail, they need to know that their value is never in question. And no pressure as parents. Like, this is a big task to give over to our children this feeling. And how we do it is, I think, the same idea as that we get from Kiddush. Shabbats and Passover and the holidays are holy. Even if we do or don't say Kiddush, but we get the job of actually declaring its holiness and saying its holiness. So we are just reminded to keep on reminding our children and reminding ourselves of how valuable they are, and always conveying that message to them, that they are valuable, not because of us, not because of what they do or don't do, but because of who they are. They're made in the image of God, they have the power of God within them, and nothing that they do or don't do can take away from that value. Sometimes
That's valuable.
Sometimes, just very practically, sometimes this is where sibling rivalry comes into play, where we are focused a little too much on accomplishments, and that creates an imbalance. And when a child is saying that he has these privileges all these privileges more than me, or I get in trouble more than him, it's not so much about the privileges or about the consequences. It's the child saying, you aren't seeing that my value is equally infinite to their value. So that's sometimes where that might practically come in. That's just something that you can reset, like, oh, I need to make this child feel like no matter what he does or doesn't do. But on both sides, the one that, might be accomplishing more or getting better grades, they both have this equally inherent to be strong value.
So how do you do that, other than just saying it straight out to them? You're valuable, you're holy. I mean, like, how, sometimes, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes when I try to say these things to them, they just roll their eyes, and it's just kind of words,
So I think the words need to be said, and then I think they can feel when we believe those words that we say to them. If we believe in them, and they feel like we believe in them. Go ahead.
I think sometimes if you give a very concrete, specific example of, like, sometimes when something happens, whether it be at school, something in their friend group, the way they treated somebody or whatever, saying, that was so valuable, that was so special, like, you did this for that kid, or something specific, and then you kind of.
Sometimes I just say, I love you. It doesn't really, and she gets it, that I love you too,
Right.
No matter what stuff is going on, I just say, I love you.
And when you say that, even especially when they're in a difficult moment, it's not like they're not feeling like you love them any less because they just did that, they did something bad. But
Sometimes I don't think you even say anything. Like, I think that's a big component. It's like silence sometimes is more powerful than anything. And if, you just sit there and, kind of go like this, or they know you're present, instead of kind of rolling your own eyes or fading out. If they see your presence, like sometimes, this is interesting. My daughter at like 5 years old didn't shut up. Like one day she just didn't shut up, and she's never shut up since. And sometimes she's 25, but she'll be on the phone, and sometimes I'm like doing other things and I'm listening, and I'm, oh God, Tali, really? And I have told myself when she was about 7 and wasn't shutting up, that I'm just going to use the word hineni. I am here, and kind of refocus myself back, because I could be thinking of a million things. Every word she says is valuable, and she's trying to talk to me, and who am I to like not be paying attention to her? And sometimes just not saying anything, I think, is even more significant than the words.
And eye contact also.
And eye contact.
Especially in the world of technology, taking a second, no matter what age, to like look at them and be like, hey, I hear ya.
Yeah. Be present.
There was a boy named Al, and he was wild and difficult and had endless questions. And his teachers and the other adults in his life were very critical of him and his behavior. And his mother, however, had infinite wisdom and infinite patience with him. And she saw his questions as intelligence, and she saw his spirit as his potential. And she was always, always there for him and his biggest cheerleader. And many years later, decades that followed, Al credited her for all his successes, and he went on to be quite successful. He was Thomas Alva Edison, the inventor of the light bulb. You know, the story that went around social media was that this note came home from school, and that said the school had written, you know, we can't have him in school anymore. He's got all these issues, and she opened it up and said, oh, your son is a genius. We cannot teach him. That the note part of it was, Snopes says it's false. But the part that there's an interview, and he said, you know, this concept of him being really labeled as difficult and just, you know, irritating and challenging was true, and she was always his biggest cheerleader, and everything that he went on to accomplish, he always credited her for that. He holds thousands of patents. He invented the light bulb, invented motion picture, founded the electric age, and so that just is how that speaks to the practice a lot about how you do it. You really cheerlead them, you really are there for them. So when you make Kiddush this year at the Seder, look at your child and remind yourself of their infinite value and potential. The next item at the Seder, which isn't not on our table because I didn't want to dig up the matzah this morning, but under the Seder plate, the foundation, like right over here, there would be the matzah. There would be 3 matzahs. So it's the base and the foundation of the Seder plate. And Sylvia, you touched on it. Matzah is a simple, flat piece of bread or dough. It's made of flour and water, and it represents humility. So bread represents our ego because it rises and it puffs up, and matzah represents humility. And humility goes hand in hand with being open to self-improvement. So to healthily and effectively and successfully parent, we need to have a healthy dose of matzah. We need a healthy dose of humility and a healthy dose of checking our ego, because we can only begin to parent once we've checked our ego. So there's various reasons why we choose to become parents. We might, I don't know, give me some. Why might we choose to become parents? Wait, we just didn't think about it. It just happened one day. Sometimes we want to share the love that we have. We want to continue our family. We want to, lots of reasons. Sometimes we didn't really think much about it. It just happened one day. But often the reasons, that some people do have, or we may have, if we think about it, are for me. It gives me someone to love, even if it's to give. I have someone to love, and I have someone to nurture, and I have someone to take care of.
But isn't that ego?
It is, right.
Right.
So it all is to continue a family. So all of those reasons, if you kind of analyze them and you take a step back, those are all ego-driven. Those are all for me. And Torah, Judaism, brings a radically different perspective. It says, yes, maybe it does give you someone to love and nurture and take care of and continues your family, and those are all good and fine, but really you parent, or you should parent, because as a calling, not for yourself, not for your ego, but to bring souls into the world and to be there for them, to raise them to be good people, to be mentors, and it's a responsibility that we have to do as best as we can, and not something that is for us. We are there for them, not they are there for us, yes.
So I can't help but bring this up, and I don't mean to challenge
Go ahead.
anything, but I'm sitting here looking at you and thinking, what about people who can't have children? And how does this speak to that? What about people who, have to adopt children, want to adopt? Other opportunities, that I just want to address, I just want to be sensitive to.
So I'm happy for, and I don't have to be the one to answer. I would love to hear
Yeah, I
anybody
just think
answer.
at a Seder table, when we're thinking about all those, what if we have someone at our
Right.
table who is struggling with infertility? You're just, look, I think that, we wanna,
Well, I would love to hear, I
Yeah.
guess, what people have to say, how does that?
You mean from the ego point of view, or you mean from?
No, from
just
the-
parenting in general.
I'm just sitting here thinking.
Right, how does,
And I'm not the only voice.
Oh, I know, but I,
Well, I adopted my daughter.
yeah.
Okay, so how did you feel? So last year, or 2 years ago, I got in trouble because I was really talking about myself, and I was like, for all the people who are not here at the table yet, we want to shout out, give a shout out. And somebody at my table was dealing with infertility. I didn't even know it. I was being very egotistical. It was about me trying to grow my family, but and they felt very called out. But the point is I feel like we need to think about, I think just, first of all, inviting people who are dealing with this, who might want to be secluded in their own space is important. But, and just being aware of this whole Pesach is about your kids, teaching the story. And if you can't do it, where does that leave? Where does that leave you?
Oh, I mean, I know that when I didn't have children and wanted children, it's a very troubling time.
Yeah.
Yeah, very painful, yes. And then I had to come to, because I tried to be pregnant, do all that, then I had to come to the conclusion, what is my goal? My goal was I wanted children. So does it matter how they come to you, and that's sort of when I made
Right.
that aha moment that I'm going to adopt. I've done too much of this. But then the question is, why did I want children?
Right.
And it was an ego. I know it was more than ego, but with the way y'all, after what y'all were talking about, I was like, I wanted to be loved. I wanted someone to love. I wanted that experience. So that's all ego, right?
but that's how we're wired. I think this is just, there's another, this is a different perspective. This is just kind of opening us up to, this is the way we feel naturally. This is how we're wired to feel. And this is the way, generations continue and the world continues, but
It makes me feel better because I fight with my husband all the time that I want another kid for my sake. It's ego. It's purely ego. He wants a kid that he can help. He wants a kid for the reason, that he wants to help any kid, no matter age, race, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I want a baby. I want to mold them into me. I want to be able to teach them everything. But I like what you said because it helps me
I think that's
take the
just
pressure
our
off.
journey. We're all in different places of that journey. And, the natural wiring is that we do things for selfish reasons, but then this is Torah saying.
Tzedakah too, why do we give tzedakah? I mean, there's all sides to that.
Right,
It's
and
not
it's-
purely altruistic. We want it to be, and
Yeah,
that's
that's
like
the goal,
ultimate,
exactly.
but-
That's where we're trying to get to. So,
I didn't mean to shift, I just think.
No,
it's-
no,
I'm always
I think
willing to
the
do that.
sensitivity
Yeah.
always needs to be there. When we're having these conversations, we always need to have that sensitivity. And then and we're all somewhere else in that journey. Go ahead.
That is, what, I think something to think about is how to be a caring and inclusive community. And it's like all of this focus on the kid, it's all about to tell the children, and which is important, but what can it be to tell people? And it can, when you're wanting to have a child and you don't, it's like a Shabbat dinner is hard enough, seeing somebody bless their children or, and whatnot. But then the Seder is it's like that on steroids, It's, it's all about the kids and throwing frogs and, no, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
Even
Think
like the
about that,
singles
like-
crisis, not to
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean-
but like the, you know, if you're not married, and where's the space for
Like
you?
what is the purpose, what is the answer to why single people should have a
So
Seder?
I think that we're all children. This is not, I think that we can
Children.
shift this conversation.
I'm
We're
so
all
excited.
parenting a child within ourselves, not just a child at our table.
And there's so much to learn at a Seder
Yeah.
for me. Like, I
I think all
sort of
these
have
things.
to hold
yeah.
myself back because
Not you.
one of my children, we could go on asking questions all night long, and they're like, "Can we move on with the Seder?" I'm like, "But what does it really mean there?" And I mean,
I feel like I've
I
done this
always
like
have
every
more
year for
questions
40
than-
years, but actually now I'm thinking, what does that mean?
I always have more questions, and my whole thing is I have to hold myself back enough so that my kids can get a word in edgewise. Well, one I don't worry about, but the
Well,
other.
the command itself is vehikatata, so it's that you should tell. It does say to children, but the you should tell part, if you're single on an island by yourself, you read the Haggadah and you tell yourself the story.
But
to
I like
keep
that
collective-
reframing,
Yeah,
like
to-
all, like we're all children.
Yeah, we can
Right.
reframe this whole
Yes.
thing to, who, you know, if the child is within ourselves, or if it's at your table, it's really the same message. And yes, we still need to have that.
We've made it to be about our kids, right? But it's
Right.
not necessarily.
And also
No, no.
that it's one of the greatest things about the Seder too, is that it can be on so many levels.
I was gonna say.
And it's the idea of if we're trying to tell this story and get people to have questions, we also don't have room in our brain to learn and get new things unless we're coming up with questions. And so I think it's equally important to try to do your research, to do things to make your Seder interesting to the kids, but also to keep the adults involved. Like if all the adults are just sort of like, ho hum, whatever, or feeling like it's only for the sake of the kids that they're even there, they haven't gotten anything out of it. So
No, I don't think we're
we-
putting an age limit on kids. I think we're all kids.
I was
mean,
gonna
I think
say,
there needs to be, like,
my goal of my
advanced
Seder
march
is to have everybody engaged.
Yeah,
It's not just
people,
about
it's
the
not
kids.
that, but, you
Yeah,
know,
I
that's
like to
it,
have
we're all
everybody.
kids. All right, so now that we've established we're all children. So in this model of, you know, it not being about us, it not being ego-driven, then we get to stop and think, like when in each time we respond to ourselves or to our child or to another person, where is that coming from? And if it's ever coming, you know, if we're responding from how that person or that child made us feel, then we're responding from an ego place. If we find ourselves comparing, if we find ourselves angry about how a child made us feel or how a child made us look, or if we praise a child for how they made us look good, all of those responses, all of those reactions, if we ever feel embarrassed, God forbid, those are all coming from a place, from an ego-driven place. And these situations, and it takes that mindfulness and that awareness, and then the introspection needs to follow with, are we parenting with ourselves in mind, or with the child and the child's needs in mind? And Torah teaches that we must always approach parenting like the matzah as the foundation of the Seder plate with that humility. The thought always needs to be, what does my child need now? How do I respond to this situation? By first and foremost and only trying as best as we can to take my child's needs, not how it makes me feel, not how it makes me look, into consideration. And sometimes we'll have if you're in a moment, you're caught in a moment of, and you have a question, what do I do now? What's the right thing to do as a parent? There might not be a right or wrong answer. The answer will always be correct if you say to yourself, what does the child need now? So if you're in a store and the child's having a tantrum, do I leave, do I stay? It doesn't really matter as long as the way that you approach this, whatever you decide to do, is what does my child need now? Not how do I look to other people, what do I need, can I handle that?
My mom's trick with that one, and it was really the way to take the ego out of it, is that she would always pretend we were the neighbor's kids. Because then that takes your personal ego. It's not about the neighbor's kid acting out in the grocery store. It's not embarrassing or a poor reflection on you, and you can deal with the child in the situation. I mean, even like if the neighbor's kid spilled milk, you wouldn't scream and yell at them, like, because
it takes your ego out of it if it's not your own child. And a lot of times you do act a little
That's
more
very
compassionately. You worry about the child's feelings, right? More than you worry about your own sometimes.
That's
But
very
that
practical.
was
Yeah,
what she
I've
said.
actually seen that written. I've seen that written as a response to somebody who wrote to a Rebbe about, I find myself being impatient sometimes with my own children, and when I was a babysitter, or when I'm a teacher, or when I was a camp counselor, or when I'm with other people's kids, like I'm so patient. Why is it that when I just, I'm trying to dress my kid after the bath and he's running away from me on the bed, like I get impatient? And the Rebbe responded, that exact same thing. In that moment, pretend that it's someone else's child, and you don't even need to pretend, because it is actually God's child who He gave to you to take care of and to raise. And pretend it's the neighbor's kid. Pretend it's God's kid. It is actually not. It's your child, but it's not your child only. It's God's child. It's a soul and a person that God gave you the responsibility of raising and guiding and mentoring. But that was
That's a lot of
That's-
pressure.
no pressure.
That's what I was gonna say, is that there's the pressure because you are in a way molding this person, and so your expectations of their behavior are higher, and you expect more from yourself to intervene, and yes, you don't expect as much from the neighbor's kids. They're not your project. This is your project, and you're taking it seriously. So when you see these behaviors, you take it really seriously, and
Right, no one says it's easy. I think that it's a good tactic. Like, you need to have your tricks, your bag of tricks, and your talking points. So you do have these expectations, and you do have the responsibility of raising your child, not your neighbor's. But in a moment where you find that you're becoming impatient, that's a great message to remind yourself of. I wouldn't lose my patience with someone else's child. This is God's child. So let me try and read.
And 8 hours a day as an educator in a room with all of your children, I feel the opposite. I feel that every day that I walk in here, that I would treat your children or the children here like
The
I
way
would
you
want
treat-
my children
Right.
treated. And so I think I love that whole idea of flipping it for my own kids, but I feel like when I'm in here, that's how I treat each child. Because otherwise, I feel like I would react to the neighbor's child differently than I would, I want to have the patience that I would expect someone else to have with my own child. So it's interesting.
My other favorite trick is that, especially in like the really bad moments when you're totally losing it, is I pretend I'm on a reality TV show on parenting.
There's cameras, right?
On parenting. And what would I do to show everyone I was such a good parent?
That is funny.
They have movies for people like that is a great
It
tactic.
makes you think about
It's
your
true.
words and think about your behavior,
That's
and
great.
if this was going to be broadcast.
If this was
Would
caught on camera,
That is great.
It is great.
And the parenting person is sitting there, like, trying to coach
Judging you.
No, but like trying to encourage you to be doing the right thing. I mean, I think we know, there's a part of us that knows what the right thing to do is and what is just us losing our temper or whatever, and that we shouldn't be. But it takes time to control that. It's like pulling back the ego, it's pulling back the immediate reaction.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that self-discipline that we're trying to teach our children. We need to be practicing it. So it doesn't, if the consideration truly is what is best for my child and in this moment, then that is the correct way to parent in that moment. And it doesn't mean, putting your child first or taking the ego out.